Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. Good morning. Is the mic on? Okay. Good morning. Morning. Thank you for doing that. Welcome everyone. I have a few housekeeping items before we get started. If everyone could please take your cell phones and turn them off or silence them, that would be greatly appreciated. Bathrooms are to your left. So through the double back doors. It's not picking up correctly. Okay, is that better? Perfect. Today's event is being streamed live and live captioned. To view the captioning, go to floridabusiness.org in the media center and look for closed captioning. There are question cards on your tables, and please fill them out, and our staff will read them when the Q&A session comes. And at this time, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to take a moment to recognize some of our guests in the room in alphabetical order. Charlene Gaynor, Office of State Senator Tom Wright. Yeah, thank you. Matt Reinhardt, Volusia County Council Member. Jake Johansson, Volusia County Council Member. Danny Robbins, Volusia County Council Member. And Will Roberts, Volusia County Tax Collector. If I have missed any elected officials, please stand to be recognized. Okay, thank you. So, let me switch. All right, this is the part of the program where normally a sponsor would get up here and talk about what they do and how they help the community. Today's sponsors are the CEO Business Alliance and Team Volusia. Now, their leadership could not be here today, so I spoke with Kent Sharples and Keith Norton, leaders of both organizations, to prepare a message for you, and really revolves around the partnership that we have. And I don't want to assume that you understand the dynamics between the three entities, so I'll describe it briefly. You see, Team Volusia is a public-private funded organization that is our recruiting arm to attract businesses to the area. Because of the way they're set up, privately and publicly, they're in a better position to recruit businesses the right way, to do the right things to be able to bring businesses to the area. The CEO Business Alliance, think of this entity as an organization that has this group of high-profile CEOs who are ready to engage any CEO who's considering to come to the area. And us, we are the Volusia County Economic Development Division. We're responsible for helping the businesses who are in the community to grow and prosper. So between the three of us, we make a great partnership, a great team to be able to help our community thrive. I always say that our mission, it's something that's easy to wrap your head around, is that all three of us want to see our children and grandchildren have good jobs when they finish college and high school in the area. So that's really our goal as a team. Recent things that I was asked to mention is that Team Volusia, as a result of the most recent trip to Farnborough, they have phenomenal leads that are considering relocation to Volusia County. And on the CEO Business Alliance side, Boeing, their defense and security unit, has joined their group, the CEO Business Alliance. And so through them, we will be able to recruit other like or similar businesses in the industry. So those are great news. And while Keith and Kent are not here, I would still like to recognize them as sponsors for today's event. So thank you. Now on to the report, on to the data, what you're here for. And I'd like to make two comments before showing you the data. The first comment is that we are in an election year. And because of that, there's a lot of turmoil, you know, politically and economically, and we have felt it in some fashion. And granted that the data that you're about to see is retrospective, you'll see a lot of stability on this information. So it's a good thing for our county. And that leads me to the second point, and that is that it's not only stable, you'll see a lot of growth. And with growth comes opportunities and challenges. And one of those challenges is that as we grow, there is a greater strain on our infrastructure, especially our road infrastructure. That's why we have a great panel that we assembled to talk a little bit about what it looks like to plan and develop infrastructure considering the growth that we have been experiencing. So with that said, let's take a look at the growth of our population. This graph shows Florida, of course, in blue, and Volusia County in orange. The solid line to the left is what has already happened, so meaning the population trend up until now, and the dotted line is what is projected in the future. So you can see, obviously, its growth is a positive slope, and our growth matches that of the state. And I know they're in different scales on left and right side. However, the percentage rate is about the same. And this is good news, because not everywhere in the United States are they having this conversation or are they showing this graph. There are states where it's actually negative. So we're actually in a privileged position. So let's take a look at the age breakdown of the folks who are coming to the area. We divided into three categories. The biggest one, the middle one, is the workforce. So basically 20 to 64 years old. On top, on purple, we have 65 plus. And at the bottom, we have the youth. Let me point out the obvious. The stacked bars on the right-hand side, the most recent, are bigger than the ones on the left. And and now all three have grown, but obviously, and you can tell visually, that the 65 plus has grown the most. Wonder why?
We're getting old.
We're getting old, but let me show you, there's another interesting reason. Let me show you the same data shown a different way. So this is the percentage change over time of our population. The black line here in the middle is a line that shows no growth. So if you were to be along that line, you're not adding more people or losing people. You're flat, okay? Anything above this line, regardless of the slope, means that you're adding people to the community. And of course, below, you're losing people. Notice there's a gigantic spike in the 65 population right around COVID time, right? Think about the fact that from all three age brackets, the one that is most mobile is the 65 plus. Why? Well, they're likely to be retired, so they're not attached to a job. They're likely to be more financially dependent, so they can afford to move from one location to another at will. And they're likely not to have a growing family, which grounds them to a location by virtue of schools, etc. But the important thing to note is that all three age brackets are on the positive side on this here in the most recent version. So that accounts this gigantic spike for what changed. I would say that if all the age brackets had the same mobility and ability to move around, maybe we would have seen even more of the other age brackets coming to this county. So let's take a look now at the inflow and outflow of our workforce in Volusia County. In this circle right here, 104,000, these are folks who wake up in Volusia County and go to work in Volusia County. The arrow pointing outwards, 106,000, these are folks who wake up in the morning in Volusia County, yet drive away somewhere else for their job. And of course, conversely, these are 58,000 people who wake up somewhere else and come to us for work. This is good news for two reasons. First of all, people like living in Volusia County. Otherwise, they wouldn't buy a property or live here in this area and drive somewhere else. Who likes commuting that long, right? So it's good news because people like this area. And the second good news is that we have a latent workforce. Think about the fact that these are people who already live here who are available to work as new companies come to the area. And so let's take a look at a breakdown of what these individuals are working on. What kinds of jobs do they have? As you can see, there's a wide array of industries in there, including industries that we're currently recruiting for, our targeted industries. Where's the, well, all the way at the top, professional and business services, which is fairly broad, but encompasses many of the targeted industries that we have, that we want to attract. Financial services. We have transportation and warehousing, which I would put under the umbrella of logistics, which we are interested in attracting, including manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and information technology. So again, let me repeat, as we grow and as we attract businesses, we have a workforce that lives here available for the right opportunity. That's a good thing. Let's take a look now at the number of employed individuals in the county. We have a steady line growing, except for that one, boom, slump right there, obviously COVID. But if you were to exclude that item, it's a line that keeps growing over time. It has stabilized right now, and it has stabilized at 3.6% unemployment. And let me repeat one more time what I said on the previous quarterly breakfast. It is a good number because it gives us a good balance between low unemployment and enough people in the pool of individuals looking for jobs that businesses can draw from to continue growing. If this number were to drop dramatically below 3.6, we would find ourselves in a tough situation to fill new positions, okay? So again, good news. Let's take a look now at what industries are these folks working at in Volusia County. Again, a wide array of businesses. I said in the previous quarterly breakfast that in a perfect world, utopic world, we want to see green bars all across, all the way down, you know? But I'll say that the good news is that we see growth across the board. Yeah, we have one that is, you know, in a negative, but consider the fact that it's 60 jobs out of 17,000. So that number, to me, it's actually immaterial. But there's growth across the board. And notice that number 2 on the list is leisure and hospitality. Think about the fact that we're a tourist community. I mean, we have been known for tourism for years and years. That's not going to change. It's not going to go away. And so we're happy to see them grow over time. But notice that now they're not number 1, they're number 2. And so in other areas, we're starting to grow. And there's more work that needs to be done. But you know, we notice that we have the kind of workforce needed to be able to add more jobs in all the different categories. Let's take a look now at permits. These are commercial building permits for the last quarter. You know, you don't need to, you know, overanalyze this. It's pretty stable. And the investment being made on commercial property is very balanced considering the kind of growth that we have had. So let's take a look at the kinds of permits that are being, that we're working on right now. Again, you can see a very balanced view considering what the growth that we have had. The biggest one, of course, is multi-family at $76 million. We have a lot of people coming in. They have to live somewhere. So that's why you see that number as big as you do. And an increase in population of 65 plus, so we have to build infrastructure and buildings, commercial buildings for healthcare. And we all need to go eat and buy things somewhere. So again, the investment is proportionate to what the growth that we have been having in the community. So good things. And let's take a look now at the permitting at the residential level. Again, I would label that as a very stable growth. And if I can take a step back, every slide that I've shown you today so far shows how well we're doing, the growth that we're experiencing. And with that growth comes a strain on our infrastructure, especially the road system. And so we have to do things to be able to adjust to the growth that we're having. So I'm going to show you what is happening with the strain on our infrastructure. And here you have two maps, West Volusia and East Volusia, and in the middle we have a legend, color-coded legend, where anything that is in purple has experienced an increase of over 50%. It could be up to, double. In traffic over the last 5 years alone, 5 years, has experienced that much growth. Then red, 21 to 49%, and even the most benign, that looks in green, has experienced over the last 5 years an increase of up to 9%. We didn't have the time to color code the entire map. We just looked at main arteries that all of us drive on a daily basis. And let me focus, for example, on I-95. You can see how a good chunk of it in our county is purple, and another one is red. So work has to be done. And Public Works wakes up in the morning and sees a map light up, and light up in places that were not lit up before. So it is something that they're working very diligently to make sure that we have the right infrastructure for the amount of traffic that we get. So what are they doing in answer to this situation? What you see here is the total anticipated investment made in the county from 2019 to 2024. So starting off with highways, and by the way, this is all new construction or improvements. No maintenance is included in this data. About $500 million in highway improvements and interchange. New roads and lane widening, $250 million. Bridge replacements, $128 million. And I used to live in Europe for a while, and we had a lot of roundabouts, and they were awesome because they seem to be very efficient at handling traffic. So I'm glad to see that we are investing in those as well, to the tune of $40 million. So now we're going to talk about how these decisions to make all this work happen. So now I'm going to bring our panel, and I will introduce them right now. Let me switch from. Can you hear me? Okay. So here's our panel. We have John Tyler, who serves as the District 5 Secretary of FDOT and the Chief Executive Officer for Sunrail. John graduated from Florida State University with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. Throughout his career with the district, he has served with several different leadership roles, including operations engineer, district project management engineer, district construction engineer, and the director of operations. John has played key roles in several transformational projects that have greatly enhanced Central Florida's transportation network, including Sunrail, Wakiva Parkway, and the I-4 Ultimate Project, the largest project in FDOT history. So welcome, John. Colleen Nicoulin has been a practicing planner in Florida for 24 years, serving both the public and private sectors, and has specialized in transportation planning for the past 18 years. Currently, she serves as the Executive Director of the River to Sea Transportation Planning Organization, TPO, where she's responsible for the administration of the organization and executing the policies, direction, and priorities established by the TPO board. She coordinates closely with agency partners to leverage funding to advance transportation infrastructure that supports the current and future needs of Volusia and Flagler counties. So welcome, Colleen. Where are you? And Ben Bartlett was confirmed by Volusia County Council as Public Works Director in 2021. Public Works is one of the most expansive departments within our county government and is responsible for services ranging from road bridge maintenance, traffic engineering, roadway and facility construction, stormwater treatment management, mosquito control, water resources and utilities, solid waste and recycling, and coastal beach management. That's a lot. Before his current role, Ben served as the county's road and bridge director. Prior to county employment, Ben worked for Orange City as the construction engineer manager. He has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from UCF. So welcome our panelists. come on board. I was asked to remind you that you have question cards on the table. They have like a little pictures and the logos. If you have any questions, please write them down, and one of our staff will come over and pick them up and read them. So to kick this off, I think it only makes sense that you tell us a little bit about your organization and what you do. And I guess we can go in this order. Ben, you can go.
Well, Lou, you did a good job of explaining what Public Works does.
Everything, apparently.
Not much to add on to that, but we are a very wide-ranging department that takes care of a lot of the infrastructure Volusia County's in.
And the local TPO here, we're currently called the River to Sea TPO, but we're getting ready to change our name, so you'll hear Volusia Flagler TPO in the coming months. So we're one and the same, but a lot of people don't know what a TPO is or what a TPO does. The TPO in the area, we cover both Volusia and Flagler County, and what we do is we provide a forum for cooperative decision making between local elected officials, input from the citizens, stakeholder groups. We develop series of plans and programs. We're a planning agency, and those plans and programs are then used to influence transportation decision making throughout Volusia and Flagler County.
Thank you.
All right, good morning. Again, my name is John Tyler. I'm with FDOT. I'm the District 5 Secretary. So let me start off with, what in the world is that? So this FDOT, we are a decentralized state agency. So we are broken down into geographic districts. We are in the 5th district, which is East Central Florida. We cover 9 counties from Flagler, Volusia, down to Brevard, Greater Orlando with Orange, Osceola, and Seminole, and then what I affectionately call the Great Northwest, Marion County, Sumter County, and Lake County. So within those 9 counties, what we do is we plan, we design, we procure right-of-way, we do environmental management, we construct, and we maintain and operate the state highway network across those 9 counties. But we're not just solely fixated on highways and bridges. We're also heavily involved in our multimodal facilities. We've got 4 international airports in Central Florida, and one of my favorites is this beautiful one that we are right here at today. We have one of the busiest cruise ports over at Port Canaveral, which is also a strategic and critical hub for cargo for the state of Florida, as well as the premier spaceport on the planet is just right down the highway from where we are today. So we're invested in all forms of transportation, trying to make sure that we keep Florida moving goods and people as efficiently as we can. Personally, I live in DeLand. I've been there for 29 years. I pretty much spent my entire career right here at FDOT in Central Florida, living right here in Volusia County. We also have, that's where our district headquarters is in DeLand, but we also have 6 field offices scattered across those 9 counties. Those field offices, they handle the construction, the maintenance, and the permits that Lou talked about. That's where the FDOT local permitting process takes place. And with us here today is Chris Barone. She is what we call our DeLand operations engineer. She has a field office in DeLand, but her office covers Volusia County. She lives on the east side, I live on the west side, and between the two of us, we got you well covered here in Volusia County. So thanks for having us here this morning. Glad to be here.
Thank you. We just saw a slide that had quite a bit of money invested in different things. Can you walk us through the decision-making process to make those things happen? I guess I'll kick it off with you, John.
Sure, absolutely. So, when I think about, those numbers, and, it's always good to see those numbers to confirm, my suspicions that, man, people are coming to Florida, and growth is such, a tremendous opportunity that brings with it tremendous challenges. So, we are laser focused on trying to make sure that we can keep up with the growth that's happening here in Central Florida and around the state. The other thing that we think about is safety, and hopefully I'll be able to touch on that towards the end as well. But safety, it's vitally important that all of us go home safe at the end of the day, not just ourselves, but our loved ones and our coworkers and our friends and families. And it's all incumbent upon us, to make sure that we're making good decisions when we're behind the wheel or on the handlebar of a bike or walking or using the train, whatever it is. So those, growth and safety, you can break those things down into metrics. You can look at where you have hot spots and where you have challenges. But at the, I wouldn't say at the end of the day, but part of this vital process is also relying on the local community to help tell DOT where we should focus, those hundreds of millions of dollars of highway improvements, where should they go? We actually rely on, I'm going to start calling it the Volusia Flagler TPO, because that's where you guys are going. And it certainly tells you where you are. We rely on the TPO to help us pinpoint where we need to focus, not just on highway improvements, but on intersection improvements, on safety issues. So we work very closely together in trying to identify where do we need to make those investments moving forward.
Thank you.
So as Secretary Tyler mentioned, we are the agency that sets the local priorities to determine where transportation investments are made. And we do that through a series of plans that we develop. We're a planning agency. We don't actually construct or build anything, but we do develop a number of plans. One of those is our long-range transportation plan, and that's a 25-year vision of what we see Volusia and Flagler County being in terms of transportation. So all those roads that popped up there in colors on your slide earlier, Lou, those pop up when we develop our long-range transportation plan, and they are part of what we call our needs assessment. So we identify what the transportation needs are in the area, and then we prioritize projects to correct some of those deficiencies through a ranking system. And we have criteria built into that ranking system that addresses safety, resiliency, congestion, growth, equity. So there's a number of different criteria that we utilize to determine which projects rise to the top on our priority list. And then we transmit that priority list to the Department of Transportation to identify which projects then we're going to move forward with the funding for them to construct.
So the road network is a tiered system. As Secretary Tyler mentioned, the state is responsible for the state highway system and the interstates. The county maintains roughly 1,000 miles of roadways. So we collect impact fees and proportionate fair share from development, growth. Growth is what puts cars on the road. So we have to account for that increase in usage, increased trips on our county roads, our county thoroughfares, and we increase that capacity utilizing the money we collect from developments through impact fees. So is how we analyze and determine what roads and what projects we're gonna look at. First thing we do is we count the number of cars on the roads, and we compare that to the capacity of the thoroughfare, the arterial, the collector road, and then we, as engineers, come up with a list of projects that we think would address those capacity issues, and then we take that priority list and we go out to the public, and we have public meetings, which we're actually have scheduled for later this month. We have 4 meetings throughout the county to engage the public, and because as engineers, we're just doing engineering. We're counting the cars, comparing it to the capacity of the roads. However, we want the public's input as well, because they're the folks that are actually using the roads. And so we gather that input from those meetings, and we take that and the priority list and the request from the public, and we take it to our county council. We present the findings, and then the council will determine what the final priority list of projects is for us moving forward, and then we will work towards allocating resources, funding that we have from development, impact fees, proportionate fair shares, as well as a portion of the gas tax, and then we start working towards achieving those projects and hopefully relieving some of the congestion and adding capacity to the county thoroughfare road network.
Thank you, Ben. And Ben, you mentioned car counting. I've always been curious how that works. I've seen the strips on the road, but do you have more sophisticated ways of doing it today?
Yeah, actually, you know, the old school method is the tubes on the road, but we have electronic counters now. We have actually data that we can pull from other areas. Everybody's carrying a phone around. That's a very good measure of how many people are using the roads as well. So there's a multitude of data out there that we use to determine, you know, who's using the roads, when they're using them during peak hours, and then we apply that data to our capacity analysis.
Thank you. Now, your jobs, I can't imagine being easy jobs, so I want to hear a little bit about the challenges that you face to be able to do what you do.
Well, you know, part of what we do is we allocate limited resources. One of those resources is funding. As I mentioned before, you know, we have basically 3 types of projects that are affected by growth. You have your maintenance projects, so think resurfacing. People use the roads that we already have. Those roads get wear and tear, and they have to be resurfaced. We have safety projects, as the Secretary mentioned. Increased growth, increased visitors leads to increased pedestrians. You know, in areas like that, we have roads that are older that maybe don't have paved shoulders, or they're adjacent to a large ditch. So we're always looking at those types of projects. And as you increase the amount of people on those roads, the safety becomes an issue. But when it comes to capacity projects, the primary funding that we receive to increase the capacity of our road network is through development, through impact fees and proportionate fair share. We do get a little bit of capacity money from the gas tax. So one of our biggest challenges is allocating that limited funding as efficiently and effectively as possible to ensure, you know, we're accounting for the growth in the best way possible. And then, you know, one thing we've seen, and I'm sure everybody's aware, is the inflation we've seen in the last few years has really had an impact on our ability to apply that funding, because the costs of everything have gone up. And so what you used to be able to buy with that funding 5 years ago may not get you as far as it does today.
Thank you, Ben.
So from our agency's perspective, one of the challenges we face covering both Volusia and Flagler County, we have 23 member governments. And collectively, we have to come together to set priorities for the 2-county area. And each of our member governments come together with their own priorities. So with limited funding, we cannot fund every municipality's priority. So we have to, as a group, collectively come together to establish what our priorities are, and then submit those to the Florida Department of Transportation. And so sometimes, you know, there's differing opinions of what priorities should be moving forward, but we have to collectively come together as a group so that we can then receive that funding as we move forward. One of the challenges also, as Ben had mentioned, is funding, because we don't have enough funding to be able to fund all of the projects on our priority list. So what we work on doing is making sure our projects are ready to receive funding. So before you can go to construction, you have to have all the planning done, all the environmental studies done, the design done, the right-of-way done. And so we work on doing those initial phases first, and getting those programmed so that when the funding becomes available, we're able to take advantage of that opportunity for funding. Because a lot of times these large infrastructure projects are very difficult to fund because of the high dollar amount. So when we have funding that we didn't anticipate, we want to make sure we are in a position to be able to capitalize on that funding.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna build off what both of these two folks have said, and you know, and Colleen's job of trying to figure out, you know, the list of priority projects for 23, was it 23? 23, you know, diverse, you know, local communities and what they all want to see. I'm glad she's doing that, not me. But that's a tremendous challenge, and you know, and it helps ensure that the things that we do focus on, you guys are supporting because it's your collective, prioritization. And that process, goes on across the state. That's not unique to Volusia County, but it's tremendously important. And then on funding, I could say the same thing that Ben just said. Funding is a tremendous challenge. We're funded a little bit differently than the county is. Our funds for basically what we do at Florida DOT primarily come from your state gas taxes and vehicle registration fees. So think of them as user fees. People that are using, the state transportation system, that's where the money comes from. And we build a balanced budget, based on the projected funds that are going to come in. We don't print money. We don't go beyond our means. We're statutorily required to work within our means. And one of the things that we have seen over the last 5 years is, just the continued growth of Florida's population. Lou showed the slide. We're over 23 million now as a state, and it's still on an upward trajectory. So that's bringing people in. That's creating demand. It's creating congestion where it didn't even exist just a few years ago. It feels like some people woke up and, wow, this road is congested now. Where did all these people come from? Well, they came from out of the state. And so that brings a tremendous challenge that we have to keep up with. And then, to accommodate that growth, we accommodate it through funding. And the funding comes again from the state and gas tax. But what has happened over the last 5 years, with gas taxes? How many people have bought a new car within the last 5 years, or a new to you car, like I always get? All right, it's probably more. My wife gets the new car. I get her hand-me-down. But those vehicles are continuing to get more and more fuel efficient. Tremendously more and more fuel efficient, which is great. Our revenues, our projected revenues, are not going up at that same rate that the population is going up. It's almost flat. With people coming in and driving more, the fuel efficiency is taking that curve and flattening it out. So how do you take your funding that's here and you meet that demand that's up here? All right, so don't boo the tax collector, all right? So that model worked for the state of Florida extremely well for the last 40 years. It's not going to work extremely well for the next 40 years. Now, I'm not here to tell you what we should do. That's the public policies are going to be up to our elected leaders. FDOT and other transportation professionals will help advise and give you insights and data to support what we need to do. But we need to come up with something different for the next 40 years. Growth is here, the revenues are here. All right, we just simply can't keep up. And then with inflation, there's been back-to-back years of double-digit inflation on the construction sector. Projects have never costed, more. So, and our budgets have never been higher as well. But with a higher budget and the inflation, we feel like we're doing, we're doing less because things they just cost so much more. So it's a tremendous challenge that the whole state needs to focus on.
Thank you. Now, a few years ago, or actually not too recent past, I read a book called The Future is Faster Than You Think. And has anyone read that book? No one, okay. You should, because it talks about what's coming our way. And one of the main topics is transportation. And they kick off the book with the all-elusive flying car, which we had predicted decades ago, and it hasn't happened. So what I want to focus on now, the conversation on, is putting aside flying cars in terms of innovation, what kinds of innovative things and ideas are you working on to make our roads safer and more resilient? And when I say resilient, I'm pointing out the fact that our infrastructure suffers greatly with the weather, especially when the weather gets angry. And so what do we do in terms of innovation?
Well, I think you're seeing a lot of innovation on the safety side when it comes to pedestrian safety and bicycle safety, and really there's a renewed focus on making sure that we're reducing the fatalities on the road. You know, you talk about innovation, the technology that we have today, cell phones, causes distracted driving. And a lot of our fatal accidents are occurred because of distracted driving, lane departures. I know the FDOT has a Go to Zero project or program where they're trying to get all fatalities to zero, and that is a worthy goal. And so you're seeing a lot of innovation on the safety side when it comes to pedestrian crossings, crosswalks. You see lighted crosswalks now, all kinds of things to alert a potential distracted driver to make sure that they're focusing on the road. You see all the technology in the car, the newer vehicles these days that focus on that. And when it comes to resiliency, you know, this county has been impacted by multiple storm events, and that has impacted our roadway infrastructure. I know at the state level as well as the county level. And so really the innovation is when you're looking at a project, whether it's rehabbing resurfacing, rehabbing, maintenance project, safety project, or a capacity project, one of the things we look at nowadays is resiliency. How is this projected project, how is this road when we're done going to be more resilient? Do we need to elevate the road? Do we need to increase the stormwater capacity? So these are all things that we're looking at when it comes to every project, because you know, we're seeing the extreme weather events, we're seeing the extreme rain events, the tide events. We have older infrastructure in the county that is subject to some of those impacts. So every time we touch a road or our infrastructure, and it's not just roads, it's all of our infrastructure, we're looking at it to make it more resilient.
Thank you.
So as a planning agency, we study these areas. As I mentioned, we don't actually construct or build, but we study these areas. We did a study during the development of our last long-range transportation plan, a resiliency scenario, where we looked at the infrastructure within our two-county area and what would happen, what facilities are vulnerable during a storm event. So we were able to identify what those facilities were, and then we're able to then prioritize improvements to those facilities, communicate to our partners, so then they can take that information and do improvements where necessary. So that's with regards what we've looked at for resiliency in the past. With regards to safety, we're actually getting ready to kick off a safety study for our two-county area. We did receive a federal discretionary grant that we had applied for Safe Streets and Roads for All. So this will give us the ability to look at facilities within Volusia County and Flagler County and identify where there are issues. Pinpoint are the fatalities and are the serious injuries all happening on a certain percentage of corridors throughout our planning area. Once we know that information, then we can start pinpointing or focusing on those particular areas and identifying improvements, again, where we would look to our agency partners to help implement or mitigate or conduct some of those improvements on those facilities.
Thank you.
We've got all kinds of innovations that we're working on, and a lot of them are focused, like Ben said, on pedestrian safety. We've got all sorts of countermeasures in our toolbox, and a great example, you know, for you to experience them is on State Road A1A up in Ormond Beach. All right, we've deployed a lot of those countermeasures kind of, you know, together in a package. You've got raised crosswalks with in-road lighting, so when you press that, you know, the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or RFB. I don't expect it's the yellow lights, you know, that flash when you press the button. They're actually in the road as well, and the road is elevated, and that's to help to remind you to slow down as you're going through that corridor. We've got other sorts of countermeasures that we're deploying across the region, and that what you're seeing there on that section of A1A, you're going to see that type of treatment pretty much all up and down A1A in Volusia County over the next 10 years as we, you know, can get to each segment of those projects. Roundabouts, Lou mentioned roundabouts. We've got 3 roundabouts under construction now, in this area, State Road 44 at Kepler Road in DeLand, US 17 up in DeLeon Springs, and up in Flagler County at State Road 11 at Cody's Corner. And a roundabout is not just the same roundabout that you experience maybe up in Massachusetts, or even in Europe. I mean, it's a modern evolution. We call them modern roundabouts, and they dramatically lower fatalities, dramatically lower fatalities. So we're seeing those across the region. When it comes to resiliency, we have one of the most vulnerable pieces of state highway infrastructure anywhere in the state of Florida, right here in Volusia and Flagler County, and that's State Road A1A up in Flagler Beach. Well, it goes from Ormond by the Sea up to Flagler by the Sea. Wilbur by the Sea. The 13 miles of state highway that runs right along the Atlantic Ocean at the top of a dune. Nowhere else in the state do you see that kind of a piece of infrastructure that's that vulnerable to Mother Nature. And I know Chris is watching Hurricane Ernesto, because he's sending waves, to that beach right as we're talking about it this morning. But we have projects, and we've developed a technology to protect that roadway, to keep it open during and after storms, to keep the communities connected to the rest of us. And what that is, it's a buried seawall. All right, it's a wall that's built, and then it's covered up by a dune. The dune is meant to be sacrificial. It's going to come and go as Mother Nature moves the sand around along the beach. But we're going to put the sand back. Right, and we're not going to be able to put it back overnight, but we will put it back. We built this wall up on the north end of Flagler Beach, and the road stayed open after Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Nicole. They never lost their roadway. The dune got washed away, and we put the dune back. All right, we're extending that technology, further to the south, to the Flagler-Volusia County line, and into Volusia County. And so that's a proven technology. We don't know where we're ultimately going to stop. We know we're going to stop today. But Mother Nature is going to continue to hurl hurricanes, at this coast. But we now have a proven system that the local community can support, and they understand the benefit that's going to come from that. And that's going to take this most vulnerable piece of state highway infrastructure and actually make it pretty darn resilient moving forward.
Thank you. Now, I know there's a few questions, and I want to make sure that we have time for Q&A. So I'll consolidate some of the other questions that I had. So briefly, if you can tell us about a successful project you have had, and maybe combine that with a project that you're excited about coming up in the future.
So when it comes to capacity and accounting for growth, the county's been focused. A lot of our growth has been in the northeast portion of the county, in the Daytona Beach area, and we're on track to complete the widening of Williamson, which is a parallel route to 95 from basically US 92 north to Hand Avenue. So that's a big project for us that adds capacity in an area where we're seeing a lot of growth. And then moving forward, I just kind of want to put a plug in for our public meetings that we're having at the end of the month, because we really want the public's input on, as engineers, we kind of look at the numbers and we make engineering recommendations, but we need the folks that are driving the roads and experiencing the issues out there to come in and tell us that and give us that input, so we can put together a road program that meets everybody's needs.
Thank you.
And for the TPO's perspective, I think one of our greatest improvements here, or greatest projects within the last couple of years, is really obtaining funding for the I-95 at US 1 interchange. That was a particular project that's been on our priority list. We set that project up by doing some of the initial work on it. As I mentioned, we need to do the planning, the environmental studies, starting with design. So we set that project up, and we had a windfall of funding that came available to the state a couple years ago during the legislative session called the Moving Florida Forward Initiative, excuse me there, where there were 20 projects throughout the state that were selected to receive funding, and we were one of them. That particular project was one of those projects that did receive funding through that initiative. And again, I had mentioned earlier is, our job is really to align projects and make them ready to receive funding when it becomes available. By receiving that funding through that initiative, we were able to advance the reconstruction of that interchange by over a decade. Because of the cost of the funding and because of how we generally receive funding through our traditional means, this was a different source of funding, a windfall of funding, and because the TPO and our agency stakeholders set that project up, we were able to capitalize on that funding. So that is a very big success for the TPO over the last couple of years. And the next project that we're working on is the I-95 at LPGA Boulevard interchange. We're putting those in place. We're putting those initial stages of completion in place and looking for that next windfall. We are creating opportunities for us, so when that funding does become available, we're able to capitalize on it.
Thank you.
And Lou, the project that I'd like to talk about is actually a series of projects, and it's a corridor, and it's the International Speedway Boulevard corridor. All right, and this community established a group, and the ISB coalition chairwoman, the founder of that group is here with us today, Miss Miriam Giabi. But this community came together probably over a decade ago and established a vision for what International Speedway Boulevard should be. It's the gateway to the world's most famous beach. People are coming down I-95, they're coming to Daytona, and we have a vision for what it's going to look like and feel like and be like from the I-95 all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. And they built that vision, and then they came to FDOT and said, can you help us fulfill that vision over time? And I want you to stop and kind of think about the different projects that we have done together along this corridor. The big $200 million interchange improvement at I-95, I-4, and US 92. We took that mixing bowl, completely rebuilt it, made it much more efficient. That's your gateway. That's your jumping off point. The improvements along ISB in front of Daytona International Speedway, the pedestrian improvement projects, all the way down to in front of Daytona State and Bethune-Cookman College. And our final piece is under construction from the Broadway Bridge to the Atlantic Ocean. And Ben's got an improvement project there at the ramp, to literally take us right to the Atlantic Ocean. So that final project is under construction now. It'll be finished up next year, and that will complete the fulfillment of a decade-plus series of improvements to fulfill your vision as a community for what you wanted that corridor to look like. And those types of projects for me are so satisfying to work on because it's what the community wants, it's your vision, and we're here to try to help you. And it takes a long time for those things to come about, but we're on the cusp of completing that vision, and that's something that I'm going to be really excited about, and hope to see everybody when we cut the ribbon on that final piece, because it's not just about that final piece, it's about the full vision that y'all created.
Excellent, thank you. Now it's time for questions from the audience. Brad, can you kick us off?
We have many questions. I'm going to split them into questions that really have broad application versus specific intersections and roads. There's more coming. You probably just answered one. There was a question about when there's multiple jurisdictions that are affected by the flow of a road. The demand is coming from multiple locations. Is the state taking a lead role in getting that stretch of road addressed, or is it done piecemeal as jurisdictions can find it? Has the state considered taking basically control of that and seeing that that's done so it's more fluid and not piecemeal? You kind of talked about that relative to Daytona Beach only, but if it was north-south and it was going through multiple jurisdictions, what is the state's role in that? Or is there a state role in it?
No, that's a great question. Absolutely. The state of Florida has a role, and yes, we do take a leadership position for those types of situations. And a great example is on our interstates. You've got a connection between Volusia County and, Lou showed it on his graph. I would think it's 100,000 people a day, or he almost drew a line on I-4 going across the St. Johns River. You know, it wasn't exactly on on I-4, but I think that's what they're using. All right, and that transcends from one, you know, regional boundary to another, from the Volusia Flagler TPO to Metroplan Orlando, and so it's on the boundaries of both of those two jurisdictions. But we do work together, and we do provide information to you know, to both groups. Try to reinforce the need to have improvements there, and I'm happy to say that, you know, even DOT will take leadership on that, but we're not having to take a whole lot of leadership on that, because they're recognizing the importance of having that connection, and the Volusia Flagler TPO has it high on their priority list. Metroplan Orlando has it high on their priority list, and that's what it takes when you have those cross regional boundary projects, is for both of them to want to see it improved. That's when we can make things happen.
Thank you. Second question has to do with money. We've heard the term proportionate fair share mentioned, impact fees mentioned. So there's money moving around. Sometimes that money is, I'll say, paid or asked for, but it's years before you see any benefit from that. Can you talk about how the money is decided, who's paying, and when it gets applied?
Sure. So anytime there's new development, that development is required to go through what we call concurrency, which is they're required to mitigate for their impacts to the thoroughfare road network. We as the county work with cities, because most of your development occurs in the cities. They're going to be the ones working with the developer on that process. When it comes to impact fees versus proportionate fair share, so impact fees are set. So X amount of dollars for every home that's built or square footage of commercial space. That's a set rate that the council has set via a study that you know, and there's state laws that regulate how much can be charged. Proportionate fair share is really if a development's occurring and there's roads in that area that are at a critical or near critical from a capacity standpoint. Proportionate fair share is really to mitigate for their impacts, and they pay an amount of money up front. So with impact fees, you don't get the impact fee until the house is built, which means that money comes in slowly, and the impact's already being felt as that money's coming in. Proportionate fair share allows the developer to pay for their impact up front. It's a process we work with both the city and the developer. Usually you'll see agreements that are signed off by all three parties, and that's essentially a prepayment of those impact fees, and it allows us to get the money ahead of time so that we can start working on a project to account for that impact. Now, one thing you got to remember when it comes to impact fees and prop fair share is that the money we have 4 impact fee zones. So the money collected in a certain zone has to be used in that zone. So it's restricted in that sense in terms of where you can use it. So if we collect money from a development in Daytona, it can't be used in Deltona or DeLand, and vice versa. So we track all that. We you know, the problem is, as we've talked about before, the inflationary costs. You got to collect a certain amount of money before you can actually go out and do a construction project. So we're always playing catch up to a certain extent when it comes to this, but when you have significant growth like we've been experiencing, we're getting significant revenue from impact fees and prop fair share, and we're able to turn those projects around quicker.
Do we have time for more questions, or?
No, I had one question. Does anybody here have a birthday today? I think there is one in the room. I'm not sure. Today. No. So, Nolu, all we have to do now is sing happy birthday to Ben, and I think we're done. Ready?
Ready.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ben. Happy birthday to you.
Well, thank you for coming. That concludes our program. Please mark your calendars for November 15th is our next Q Breakfast. If you're interested in sponsoring this event, please come see me or one of our team members. And what is it? Oh, and on the tables, there is a survey that has a QR code. We're